This was supposed to be the night Canada waited 40 years for, the 12th of June 2026, Toronto's BMO Field, the first men's World Cup match ever played on Canadian soil, a nation that has been building toward exactly this moment for 2 decades, through the growth of the professional league, through the emergence of a generation of players good enough to compete at Bayern Munich and Juventus and in the Champions League, finally arriving at the stage it had worked so hard to reach. Canada against Bosnia and Herzegovina, a genuine football occasion, a historic night. And it was historic. Canada won. The football delivered. Alphonso Davies played. The country had its World Cup moment. But surrounding that moment, in the stands, in the pre-match ceremony, on the screens of millions of viewers who were watching from home, something was visible that the promotional material had not prepared anyone for. Empty seats at the first men's World Cup match ever played in Canada, on the night Canada's own team played. Visible gaps in a stadium that was supposed to be the embodiment of a nation's football arrival. Canada's opening ceremony featured Nora Fatehi, the Bollywood actress and dancer who performed the official World Cup song. Vij Dream and Sanjoy completed the lineup. And within minutes of the ceremony ending, social media was producing a reaction that the governing body and the host committee had not planned for. Fans criticizing the ceremony as less exciting than expected. Observers noting the empty seats visible in the Toronto Stadium. Questions about why the first World Cup ceremony on Canadian soil, a historic moment by any measure, had produced an atmosphere that felt, to many watching, significantly below what the occasion demanded. Set that alongside what the numbers were telling anyone willing to look at them clearly. The day before the tournament opened, the 10th of June, approximately 180,000 tickets remained on FIFA's official resale platforms. Not weeks before the tournament, the day before. And around 15,000 group stage tickets were still available through FIFA's own direct sales website, at a tournament that the governing body's president described as generating 500 million ticket requests, a tournament with unprecedented demand, with 180,000 tickets on the resale platform the day before it opened. So what's really happening here, and what does Canada's opening night tell us about the broader picture? Let's start with the ceremony itself, because the comparison that sits uncomfortably alongside Toronto's night is what happened in Mexico City the evening before. The Azteca, 83,000 people, Shakira performing the tournament song with Burna Boy in a stadium where Pelé and Maradona both wrote history. Maná, Lila Downs welcoming the world in 4 languages, including indigenous Mexican tongues. A ceremony that felt rooted in something, in a football culture so deep that the ceremony wasn't manufacturing enthusiasm, but channeling something already there. Toronto's ceremony had genuine elements. Nora Fatehi is a global artist with real reach across multiple continents. The World Cup song performed live at the first World Cup match on Canadian soil carries its own significance regardless of the lineup around it. But the reaction told a story. Fans calling it less exciting than expected. Social media comparing it unfavorably to Mexico City. The atmosphere in the stadium feeling like it hadn't quite ignited the way the occasion demanded. BMO Field holds approximately 30,000 people in its standard configuration, expanded for the World Cup. It is an intimate stadium by World Cup standards, one of the smaller venues in the tournament. That intimacy was always supposed to be its strength, a compact, electric atmosphere where noise concentrates and every supporter feels close to the pitch. When it works, a smaller stadium at full capacity is louder and more intense than a half-full giant. When it doesn't fill completely, the opposite is true. The gaps are more visible, the silences are more audible, and on Canada's opening night, the gaps were visible. Here's where things get more complex, because the Canada ceremony and the Canada attendance situation sit alongside something FIFA did in the 24 hours surrounding those events that has generated its own controversy. When images and reports of empty sections at the Guadalajara Stadium during South Korea against Czechia circulated widely, FIFA responded through its official social media channels with a statement. It said that official attendance figures reflect tickets scanned and spectators present within the stadium footprint,
rather than visual assessments of seating at any given time. It denied the stadium was empty.
That statement raises more questions than it answers, because the distinction between tickets scanned and spectators present in the stadium footprint on one hand and visual assessments of seating on the other is precisely the distinction that every supporter watching from home was making with their own eyes. If 44,985 tickets were scanned at a stadium holding 45,664 as the official attendance figure suggested, but hundreds of seats were visibly empty in the stands, the explanation is one of two things. Either a significant number of people whose tickets were scanned were not in their seats at the point the images were taken, or the official attendance figure and the visual reality of the stadium were telling different stories. FIFA's response did not resolve that question. It reframed it, and the reframing, the insistence on official figures over visual evidence, landed with particular force given that 180,000 tickets were simultaneously available on the governing body's own resale platform. The bigger issue is what the attendance pattern across the first 2 days of the tournament reveals when you look at it as a whole rather than match by match. The Azteca was full. Mexico's home opener, in a stadium with a football culture running through every stone of its structure, in a country where 70% of the population identifies as a football fan, produced exactly the atmosphere a World Cup opening should produce. Every other match in the tournament's opening 48 hours produced visible gaps in the stands and questions about demand. South Korea against Czechia in Guadalajara, Canada against Bosnia and Herzegovina in Toronto. 2 matches, 2 different countries, 2 different sets of circumstances, but the same visible result. Not full. Not the electric, every-seat-taken atmosphere that the promotional language had implied. Think about what this means for the United States opening match, which took place at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles on the same evening as Canada's match, a stadium holding close to 70,000 people. The host nation's team against Paraguay in the opening match of the American portion of the tournament. The numbers for that match will tell their own story, but in the context of what had already happened in Guadalajara and Toronto on the first 2 days, the pattern of the tournament's early attendance picture was already clear enough to examine honestly. Now, there is a counter-argument worth making carefully, because honesty about this story requires both directions to be represented. World Cups take time to build. The atmosphere of the group stage is always different from the knockout rounds. Matches between nations without the largest traveling supporter communities, South Korea against Czechia, Canada against Bosnia and Herzegovina, will naturally draw smaller crowds than the quarterfinals and semifinals. The tournament's momentum is not fully established on its first 2 days, and the football itself, South Korea's dramatic second-half comeback, Canada's historic first home match, produced genuine drama and emotion that the empty seats did not diminish. But the counter-argument only goes so far, because the attendance shortfall at this tournament is not a surprise that emerged on the day. It was predicted by hotel occupancy surveys. It was visible in aviation booking data. It was anticipated by everyone who looked honestly at the pricing model, the travel barriers, and the visa restrictions that have characterized the buildup. And the 180,000 tickets still available on the resale platform the day before the tournament opened were not a reflection of last-minute hesitation. They were the accumulated product of months in which the conditions for attending this World Cup had been made more difficult, more expensive, and more uncertain than at any previous edition of the competition. Canada's opening night delivered the football it needed to, the historic first home match, the result, the occasion. But it also delivered something the host committee and the governing body would rather not have had visible at exactly this moment: empty seats at the first World Cup match ever played on Canadian soil, on the night the host nation's own team took the field, and a ceremony that the people who watched it described, without particular cruelty, as less exciting than expected. What do you think? You followed enough World Cups to understand the difference between a tournament that takes time to find its rhythm and one that is structurally struggling to fill its venues.
Does what you've seen in the first 2 days, the Azteca full, Guadalajara visibly short, Toronto with visible gaps on its historic night, feel like the normal pattern of a tournament finding its feet? Or does it feel like the visible confirmation of something that the data has been pointing toward for months?